Hi, I'm Imogen,
And I'm Scarlett.
and we're going to be talking to you about our personal experiences of woofing.
Mhm.
So, what is woofing?
Okay, so WWOOF stands for Worldwide Opportunities in Organic Farms. But it's been going for quite a long time, so other people might know it as Working Weekends on Organic Farms or Willing Workers on Organic Farms. And what it does is it connects people who, like you, are interested to know about a different way of life, alternative living, low impact methods of farming, growing, building, getting an energy supply, with people like me who are already living in this kind of a way and who are willing to share this space, their knowledge, food and accommodation in exchange for help that you would give, practical help that you would give on the land.
And it's really fun. So, I've been woofing with Scarlett for a couple of months now, and I'll be here for the rest of the growing season. So, yeah, we wanted to just discuss a bit about how it works for each of us as a host and a woofer. So, I've woofed before. I heard about it when I was at university, and I did some in the university holidays. That was a few years ago. And then this year, I recently finished my master's degree and was kind of thinking about what my next steps would be. And it felt like a good time to kind of take a break from the sort of rat race of career and education, and do something which felt a bit more meaningful and connected to the land, especially with, you know, the kind of rising awareness of climate change as a reality which is affecting all of us, and issues about food sovereignty in the UK. So I decided to woof and found Scarlett's place, really close by to where I currently live. And there are woof organisations all around the world, in many countries across all the continents, I believe. So if you're interested in travelling and seeing how permaculture or organic growing happens in different kinds of climates or different kinds of landscapes, and that's definitely an option. But for me, it was really important to stay in the UK, for sustainability reasons, you know, not to be flying around all over the place when there's lots and lots happening in this country. But you know, even within England, or within Britain, you can go to Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and there's a huge amount of diversity within this country as well. So if you're particularly interested in travel and getting to know a new place, and that's an option here too.
And I would also say it makes really a lot of sense to do it as you have been doing it, because you're getting to know your local climate, your possibly your local soils, although soils do vary admittedly. You're gaining yourself a network of people within this country that when you start doing it for yourself, you can very easily call me up and ask for some advice or a cutting of this thing or a seed of that thing. So I think for me it makes a lot of sense to do it in the country where you live.
Or even the county.
Even better, yes. And I think local woofing does make a lot of sense, although I do understand people like to see different areas of the country and indeed the world. But yeah, if people are going to travel, I would urge it to be in a sustainable way. And the other thing for that is, if you want to woof within the UK, you join WWOOF UK. If you want to woof in France, you join WWOOF France. Likewise, New Zealand, join WWOOF New Zealand. There is no one global WWOOF ticket as things stand.
So the process for getting in contact with you was really straightforward. I just went to www.woof.org.uk, and that's 2 W's, and paid a small fee. It's £20, and for that you get access to all the hosts in the country to make contact with and get the ball rolling. So apart from that, no other money changes hands. It's a purely voluntary system for the volunteer and for the host, and apart from the money you need to get where you're going, that's all you need.
Because the host then provides your accommodation and your food. For a host it costs £30, and that gives you membership to WWOOF UK for the entire year, and you can have as many or as few woofers as you like, for as long or as short as you want them. Again, it looks exactly as you tailor it to suit yourself. And I believe there's probably about 500 hosts, maybe 600 in this country. And as I understand it, you were able to find my place because you were able to search on various criteria.
Yeah, so the WWOOF UK website is really easy to use. You sign up, pay a small fee to have access to the list of hosts for a year, and you can filter by location. There's hundreds of hosts in England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and so I could search for somewhere which was local to me, which felt important for, you know, not travelling miles and miles and using a lot of petrol, but also for specific things that I was interested in. So one big area that I wanted to learn more about was permaculture and that element of organic growing. So I was looking for somewhere which was doing those things and was focused on growing food. And yeah, just by searching for those keywords, found Scarlet, and away we went, really.
Yeah. And diet as well, isn't it?
Yes.
Because I'm a vegetarian, actually mostly vegan, but as a host, it's important to me people's food choices. So I wouldn't be prepared to host a volunteer who ate meat, or ate meat here rather. So I put on my profile, I can provide vegetarian food and vegan food, but there are a multitude of hosts out there that look after their own excuse me, their own flocks and herds of various animals, and look after them in a kind, caring, conscious way, high welfare standards. And I'm not casting judgment on whether that's right or wrong. It's just not right for me. But I think what I'm really trying to say is I happen to be a vegetarian, permaculture, no dig, small holding. But there are hosts out there who are predominantly about meat production or dairy production, where you can learn to process all sorts of things, make cheese and so on. And it's all fine, but the emphasis of WWOOF, whilst it's worldwide opportunities on organic farms, you don't have to be certified organic, because I'm not certified organic, but it's really important to have the organic mindset, which comes with high welfare standards and caring about the earth and stewarding it in a responsible way. That's at the core of the ethos of what WWOOF is all about, along with an educational exchange. So it's important for me and for the WWOOF organisation that part of what goes on between the exchange, it isn't just food and accommodation in exchange for help on the land. It's also that you're learning about these techniques and experiencing it as a way of life. And I've got to say, me learning as well from you, because I'm really not going to say it's a one-way street. I've learned a lot as well from being a WWOOF host. Yeah,
it's about kind of exchange of mind, isn't it? Sort of people coming with new ideas for things, or things they want to try out in their lives or with land. And I think you've got the scope to kind of let that happen here. And yeah, like you said, there's so many different kinds of WWOOF hosts, so whatever you're interested in, there's probably somewhere out there doing it that you could get involved in, and give them your skills that you already know, or learn new ones. So yeah, it's a good opportunity maybe to talk about what specifically we're doing here in terms of different kinds of growing. So there's lots happening, as you can see, we're in this lovely polytunnel, and that's just one element of the growing which is happening here. So there's a huge variety of things. There's no dig beds outside in the main vegetable growing area. We've got a forest garden area,
hay meadows as well, which was quite a steep learning curve for me when I first arrived here. It's an 8-acre small holding, and a lot of it is pasture land, but they're unimproved meadows. So what I've realised on my journey, I've been in this small holding 4 or 5 years now, is that as well as growing food, what else is really important to me is species diversity and managing the land for habitat, because it's not just all about us humans and living on this planet. We are part of a broader ecosystem, and it's really important to me that the whole web of life is supported. So I've had to learn how to manage meadows for wildflowers, which is very different to managing land for veg growing, because one place you want maximum fertility, the other place you want minimum fertility. So it's a bit of a strange and foreign mindset for me. But yeah, I think that's the main point. And again, going back to that organic mindset, it is about everything, a holistic approach to living. Also things like, you haven't done any of this yet, but because a lot of the heating I have for space heating and water heating is wood based. So the wood fuel is taken out of our very developed hedgerows here. And so one of the tasks is identifying those, cutting them out, cutting them down, splitting them. So that's another thing that you might learn if you were here in a different season, or as the season progresses and we start thinking of winter time.
Right.
Yeah,
I think like that's a really important element from my experience, is being in a specific place and seeing the needs of that place for the human inhabitants as well as the rest of the ecosystem, and how specific that is. You know, on a very small level, you know, even if you were in the next valley, things would probably be different, how you needed to manage the land. And I think that's it gives you a picture of how much knowledge that there needs to be passed on, and also, you know, how to apply bigger principles from things like permaculture or thinking about rewilding and habitat protection to a specific place, and actually being in that place and doing that work as an individual is great. And learning a lot.
Well, I mean, and that's it. And I've had that reflection back to you before, because I've had quite a few woofers pass through here, and it's that immersion in the way of life. And you learn it's not a 9 to 5 or, you know, whatever hours it is. Maybe we can talk about that a little, how your different experiences have been in terms of the actual practicalities of the exchange. But it's not just set hours. It's what you pick up in the conversations around the dinner table, right, or much more broadly, how the food, even the food that's bought into the farm, how that's done, where it's bought from, how we can shop in a more responsible way for the things that we can't grow for ourselves here.
And how we can process the things which are here and use them in, you know, a timely way and in a way which makes the most out of the harvest, or whatever's come in. If there's a lot of something, how to make good use of that, how to preserve it for future seasons. I think that kind of human relationship element is really important, because then you're not, it's not abstract, you're learning from someone's real life and being part of that life. So maybe that's a good time to talk about the kind of day-to-day aspects of how it works. So in my previous woofing experience, that was quite a lot bigger of an operation, and there was, you know, 5 or 6 volunteers at a time on a kind of rolling basis throughout the season, and it was a lot more kind of you know, we gathered in the morning, had a meeting, and everyone was assigned their tasks and went off. But here with Scarlett, we kind of start the morning, see how we're feeling, have a bit of a kind of chat about what we might want to do that day, or, you know, quite often just go outside and see what needs to be done and kind of prioritize based on what we see, which is really nice because it allows you to respond to the weather, or you know, specific things which arise which you might not have planned for, and also to take into account ourselves and what we feel like doing. But yeah, I think obviously only having a limited experience, but I can see that probably every woof host is different in how they run things, and that's probably something that you might want to discuss if you're thinking about woofing, or think about for yourself, you know, how do you like to work. And
I think that's a point that I would like to make, actually. I would say if you're thinking of going woofing, the best bit of advice I can say is to have a really good dialogue with the host. We met actually before we agreed anything, didn't we? I do realise that's not always possible, but a telephone conversation, a Skype call, or other sort of video platform is just such a great way just to make sure that you're going to get along and you both set off with the same expectations
I think that's a good word for it.
Yeah.
Making sure you're on the same page about what to expect from the experience and how things are going to work, really. And just that you get on with the person as well, because, I mean, I'm here for quite a long time, and it would be a bit of a disaster if we didn't get on or had really conflicting ways of approaching work or, conversations and decision making. And I think another thing we haven't mentioned is that whilst I'm here for a whole growing season, there's no kind of upper or lower limit on how long you can woof for, just a couple of weeks or for a whole year, or even much longer term than that if it works out for the host and the woofer. So, if you're not sure what you're interested in, or you want to try lots of different places and styles of working and, different kinds of agriculture, then we could get a lot into one season by kind of going around to different places.
Again, that's where I would say it comes back to a sort of a negotiation between the host and the volunteer. The charity of WWOOF itself provides the means for the two to connect, and then it's up to the two to speak to each other what suits them. Many hosts, I mean, normally it's ideal to have somebody for a shorter space of time, and then if things work out well, to move on to a longer space of time. But sometimes you just want to say, I need someone for 6 months, and select on those processes. Again, it just so varies. So many things vary from host to host and from volunteer to volunteer. So again, I can't emphasize enough, I have found the number one tip is good communication, to get clear on everyone's expectations before any agreement is reached. I think that is a number one tip that I can give anyone thinking of going woofing. So you're staying in a caravan. You had a choice of a number of different types of accommodation in a way, but you opted to be in the caravan outside, but you've got free access to anywhere downstairs in the house, Wi-Fi, kitchen,
shower,
lounge, whatever. But we always have our lunches together, usually dinners together as well. So there is that crossover in time, and a good point to check in as well with each other. How are we? How is the day going? How is the stay going?
Yeah, and it gives me that kind of feeling of having my own space without it being completely cut off from what you're doing. And also just really lovely to be in the caravan and right by the veg growing areas and kind of out in nature, really. So that might be something else to think about if you're considering woofing, like what is the accommodation like and what you would fancy for your stay. So we've covered a bit about how woofing works and what it looks like here, and maybe it'd be nice to kind of give you a picture of the actual tasks that I'm doing as a volunteer and which are ongoing here at the small holding. So it's really interesting actually kind of going back to the idea of being really in a place and getting to know it, to see how the tasks have changed over the few months that I've been here. So initially it was a lot of preparing the ground for planting, sowing seeds in the greenhouse, and kind of general maintenance after the winter. And now as the season is progressing, we're beginning to harvest things. We've got our first broad beans, strawberries, things are coming out into the polytunnel, like these tomatoes, all going out into the ground. And it's becoming more about kind of sustaining the things which are growing rather than getting them going, which is really interesting. And the different needs of different kinds of plants, that's kind of something that I think we're learning a lot about, well, I'm learning a lot about. Transplanting things, potting things on, as you say, putting them into the ground. I'm just trying to think of some of the other things that you've harvested so far as well. Done some carrots, salad, lots of salad, loads of salad, daily salad. And that's something that's probably important to say about the lunch times, is that I do try and make as much of the food from here as possible. We're often having the eggs for lunch. We've got ducks, normally have chickens, but not so at the moment. Waiting to get some more. They met with a bit of an accident with a fox, unfortunately. It's very upsetting. But yeah, so we have a lot of eggs. Or again, even that is thought through. Both the ducks and the chickens are rescue animals. So we're not hatching them on ourselves. There is that issue every
for every female duck or chicken you hatch, you've got a male, and then what happens to the male of the species? So again, that's a sort of a conundrum for me, that I have considered and come down on if I'm taking rescue chickens from places where they're intensively farmed. For me, that seems the most ethical option. And then if I feed them as much from around here as I can, food waste, scraps, and also organic pellets and what have you, then it feels like that is an ethical thing to be able to provide for lunch. So we quite often have that. You're enjoying making sourdough bread.
Yeah. So
that's another skill you've acquired.
Yeah, definitely. So that's been a good skill to learn for using kind of different ingredients. So there's not a lot of flour available at the moment, various reasons. What we have got a lot of is buckwheat flakes, which can get ground down to flour really easily with just a hand blender. And I've never baked with that before, and I was a bit like, oh, is this going to work? And baking with sourdough and natural yeasts, it takes a bit of tinkering with and getting kind of comfortable with it, but we're having really delicious bread from something which I probably wouldn't have thought to use if I was able to just pop to the supermarket and get whatever I wanted, without thinking about using the things which were here and using natural processes to create something, probably a bit more sustainably. So I think this is really good to see. We're talking about veg and then it goes into food and how that kind of process occurs. Everything is linked together, from what we're growing and thinking about what it's going to be used for.
And there's lots of stuff in the freezer as well from last season. Lots of squash. We had a massive squash harvest last year, and lots of leeks still. Herbs, have a big herb garden. So I'm always making my soups from scratch because we have a day woofer, a local woofer, who comes up every Monday from the local town. And by bike, yeah. And so the way that looks, he comes up for the day, and we do various tasks around all together. We create a lunch that is normally a very hearty, wholesome soup, from things that are in the freezer. So produce from the land and your lovely sourdough bread, and then he takes away any produce he wants, really, or some seeds or some seedlings, whatever he can carry on his bike. So that's day local woofing, which is another way that woofing can look. So from the host point of view, my motivations, I really enjoy teaching people this sort of stuff. I'm not an expert, but I do know some stuff. And I really want to pass that on. I feel really passionate that people, young people or older people, it doesn't really matter, because the volunteers I've had have been from 16 to 60 plus.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Right.
And what I have tended to find is that it's people in different in that sort of the changes of life, the crossroads of life, and it might be students in gap years, or even younger, because I have had a 16-year-old from France, but also people that perhaps they've been doing a job in industry for a while, and then they've suddenly thought, I don't think this is for me, so they want a different career, or to find some more meaning and fulfillment in life. I've had people who are wanting to buy their own small holding, and they're wanting to see what works for that. I think this is really intelligent. What works for us, what doesn't work for us, what might we look for when we're looking for our own small holding. And certainly for myself, when I first started out being interested in this way of life, and I was first learned about diggers and dreamers because I was also interested in community living, and decided I wanted to go around and do some woofing in community and experience that for myself. I thought I wanted to do a lot of work with animals and livestock because I love animals. And the more I work with animals, the more I realised that at the end of this process, after looking after them and loving them, you're taking them down the abattoir. And So actually my journeys ended with me being vegetarian and almost vegan. So that's a really profound learning.
Yeah.
So I definitely advise, if somebody's thinking that they want to do something similar, do come woofing, do experience it, because you might be surprised at some of the answers that you receive. So I love being an open space for people to do what you're doing, which is explore where they are with their journey around food and ways of life. But the benefits for me as well are, because I'm organic, I'm small scale, I'm without machinery, I need more pairs of hands in order to be able to maintain and develop the raised beds that we've been creating, various other things that I haven't got around to doing, because there's only so much I can do. So the additional help is a motivation for me as well, to have volunteers here.
I think that's a really nice place to end it on, really. I mean, this kind of that real sense of it being a beneficial process for everybody involved, and I think if you go into it with an open mind and a willingness to connect with people, then you'll have a great time.
And just to acknowledge that things in this country don't look exactly how they normally look. We have a pandemic. People can now move around. You've been with me since lockdown. We have had throughout the whole time, as I mentioned, a local volunteer coming up every week. He cycles up. He brings his own cup and plate and knife and fork, and we socially distance when we serve him a one-pot meal. We socially distance when we sit down to eat it.
And when we're doing tasks.
And when we're doing tasks. All the tools that he uses, he leaves in his own wheelbarrow in a particular place on site, and we don't touch it for 3 days until it's sort of decontaminated, if you like, by the UV rays.
So I think just to say that while things aren't looking as straightforward as they might have done a few months ago, woofing is still definitely an option. And again, as you said, communication is the key. You might find that you have a local farm who's desperate for someone to help one day a week and can really easily accommodate social distancing, or find another way to make it work. So don't think that it's not happening just because of the pandemic, basically.
Yeah, and also just by the nature, a woof house tends to be a larger establishment. Although, I mean, in fairness, they can be anything. They can be a house with a decent sized garden or an allotment. It doesn't have to be a farm. We were saying crofts and educational places, schools, even
city farms.
There's vineyards, breweries, producing organic products, of course. A woof house can look very, there's a big diversity of woof hosts. So what you quite often find is that there is external accommodation, external to the house, I mean. So if people are travelling somewhere and then have to isolate for a period of time, that can be done on a lot of small holdings, as long as there's nobody shielding, as long as it's obviously in agreement with both parties. But that's what it's all about. Does it suit both parties?
And to double check it's within the government guidelines.
Within the government guidelines, and the way you travel within government guidelines, of course, because there's restrictions on public transport, or there have been. So it can be done, but be responsible if you're going to do it.